7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Phresh presents Que Bola, where we talk to various movers and hustlers who are popping off and succeeding in the 305 and at the same time influencing the culture. I'm your boy D Fig. Holla at your boy when you see me in the street. Ew! Entonces, mi gente, ¿cómo estamos, bro? I hope everybody doing good out there in the hemisphere and enjoying this hot summer. Que está de madre, está caliente con cojones. Yo, it is hot AF out there, but hey, we're surviving in the swampy South Florida, man. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Que Bola podcast. It's your boy D Fig. Holla at your boy when you see me in the street. Ew. In this awesome episode, we sat down with Mario Alejandro Ariza. He is a journalist, a poet, and an author. We discussed his book, Disposable City, which can be found on all platforms, Amazon, Audible, etc. I got it on Audible and I heard it. Bro, this book is for real. It's the truth. Anybody who's in South Florida or considering moving to South Florida, I highly suggest you get that book. You listen to it so you can plan accordingly. Mario sat down with us in this awesome talk. We chopped it up and discussed various things that are happening in South Florida. Climate change, gentrification, climate change gentrification, socioeconomic injustice, a bunch of other topics that we go into in details. It was a really fun, engaging, and energetic conversation. And without further ado, let's get into this, alright? Listo! Alright, so we are back in the mix with Mr. Mario Alejandro Ariza, investigative journalist out of South Florida, author of the book Disposable City, Miami's Future on the Shores of Climate Catastrophe, which seems to be like it's going to be something serious. We're going to talk about all of that in this episode. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning in and listening to this episode. Like I always say, if you like it, share it with your friends. If you hate it, share it with your enemies, but just share this motherfucker, all right? 100%. So, and by the way, the podcast is explicit. You can say however you want to say, whatever you feel. You know what I'm saying? Just want you to know. All right, so Mario, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me on, Darwin. I really appreciate it.
No, man, I highly appreciate you coming on and like discussing the various things that go on in your creative field. You're an investigative journalist.
Yes.
Which basically means you're a writer, but you dig up shit that people don't want to be dug up. That's what it seems like.
That's the exact, literally, I mean, we don't say shit in the definition, but it's literally, it's stories other people don't want told.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty freaking intense.
Yes.
Especially in South Florida.
Oh, yes. This is a very fascinating town to be doing this kind of work.
Okay, so yeah. So let's start off with that, man. Like, as I heard your book. I actually heard it through the Audible. I finished the whole entire thing. I didn't really read it, but
you read it?
Yeah, I read it. I did it with my ears.
Yeah.
So as I'm listening, I hear like your background. You went to Belen.
I did.
You're from South Florida.
Yeah.
You're 305 born and raised type of situation. I mean, you immigrated.
Born in Santo Domingo, but I came here when I was 6, and like I feel pretty
raised
305.
in the South Florida 305,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So you pretty much know like how things operate out here, right? From a childhood perspective, like you grew up knowing what's popping. You know?
I mean, I was pretty unpopular, I would say, and really nerdy.
Yeah.
But like, I kind of have always wondered how the city works and how like things get done or don't get done, and who gets it done and who doesn't get it done.
Yeah.
You know, and so like, I left for 10 years. I came back, fell in love with this place all over again when I was 28, and I keep wondering, like, why is this city so interesting and so unique and so kind of crazy sometimes?
I oftentimes think the same thing. Like, I'm always wondering, what is it about South Florida? I mean, my answer always comes back to the fact that we're first generation, and we are, not all of us, but the vast majority of the people here are first generation, and that requires you to be a hustler.
Yeah.
And when you have a hustler's mentality, it kind of like negates everything else outside of like making money and like getting on.
Yeah. I think there's a really fascinating quote, and I forget who said it, but somebody once described South Florida as a sunny place for shady people.
Oh yeah.
You know? And like, I don't want to characterize it because there's like tons of like hardworking, honest folks down here, but there's also a lot of hustlers, right?
Yeah.
And like, figuring out, like, you learn very quickly, very early on to kind of like get a sense for other people's angles and like really figure out where people are coming from and kind of like look at people like out of the side of your eye, like, you know. And like one of the things that I'm really fascinated about right now is we've got this narrative of like, okay, everybody from New York is moving here, everybody from San Francisco is moving here, right? And like you see stories about house prices being super high and like people like walking around town being like, oh, Miami's so fascinating. But like, I can't wait for the stories where these people discover, you know, just how tricky this place can be.
Yeah.
Right. Like when they try and hire a contractor to get their
Yeah.
house fixed or something like that.
No, definitely. I totally see that. That was my number one thing because I know Miami's full of hustlers, right? Full of entrepreneurs who are like trying to get on and trying to do various things. And then you're gonna like add mad fuel to that fire because all these venture capitalists are gonna come out here and just throw money around. But they're throwing it in the wrong city, bro, because like out here, anybody will take your money and hustle you. You know what I'm saying? And like I'm waiting for like the day that
for
this
those
is
stories, right? Like I want to tell a couple of them at some
it's
point.
like, oh, this guy got bamboozled. He thought he was spending money on an app, but it was really going to like
Right?
like Live or something.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh
Or
my
like,
gosh.
Or 11.
Yeah, you know, and I covered the federal courts here for a minute for the paper that I work with, and for those who don't, you know, like follow the court system, the federal court system is like it's a limited court and it's not the state court system, but when the like big financial crimes happen, like that's federal court.
Okay.
So like I covered a lot of stuff in terms of Ponzi schemes and white collar crime and financial fraud. And I mean, you just see so much stuff down here. Like I think the other day, if I remember the press release correctly, like this guy had told people he was going to make an app, right? $40 million. They invested. For sure. He took all the money, lived the high life. And then when push comes to shove, there's not really an app.
There's nothing.
I
mean, but that's Miami in a nutshell.
That's exactly.
That's gonna happen to so many venture capitalists out here. It's not even gonna.
I mean,
I hope it doesn't.
I don't hope it happens to anybody. But if it does, I want to tell the story.
It's so intense. It's a Miami thing. Like you got to be very careful with who you deal with out here.
Yeah, you really do.
And it's okay. So that's a part of your job description that I really was like interested. I'm really interested in understanding like how do you deal with the threats of safety to your life, because you're dealing with people who have big sums of money who could reach out and touch you. I mean, especially in South Florida.
Yeah.
Like how do you deal with that?
You act in a way where you're really nice and you're really humble.
Okay.
And you approach every story without any preconceived notions. And you say, you know, hey, I'm just here trying to tell, you know, the story. I want to hear your side of it.
Yeah.
If anybody's going to get their name mentioned in the paper, you give them a chance to tell their side of the story.
Okay.
And you always want to try your best to make sure that, you know, you're dealing with people as fairly as possible and as honorably and as transparently as possible. So like, you know, no tricks, no
Gotchas,
surprises, no gotchas, none of that. And it's really weird because like, so I spent a long time trying to make money writing poetry, right? Which is like a really strange profession. I went University of Miami's poetry program for 3 years. And poetry is like this really spiritual thing, right? They call it spirit work and all that. But like journalism is strangely much more intense spirit work, right? Because like you always have to take into account everybody's humanity, right? And you have to acknowledge that you don't know the whole story, right? So like even for example, like a Ponzi schemer who's stolen millions and has hired the cops to patrol his house and may have even paid a cop to arrest somebody he didn't like, right?
Yeah.
True story. This actually happened in Fort Lauderdale a couple years ago. Gentleman Scott Rothstein.
That's crazy.
Yeah. You know, even then, you have to like approach everybody as a complicated human with multiple aspects, right? Like people may have done evil in their life, but it doesn't mean they are evil, right?
Wow, that's really hard to differentiate.
Yeah.
So it takes. I mean, how do you? Damn, that's a crazy. I never thought about it. So like, somebody that does evil, you don't approach them as, oh, they're an evil person who's gonna continuously do evil.
No, not necessarily. No, I
So
mean,
it's by approach, by each individual action that they take.
yeah, you gotta kind of look at them and be like, obviously, like, their past actions determine what their character is, right? But like every human is complicated and complex, right? So like even like a dude in prison who has done awful stuff to get there, right? Like you don't know where that person is, and you got to sit there and you got to listen to their story and like realize that you have to humanize them in their story, right? By telling their story, you're taking a responsibility. And so like that's also part of how a journalist protects themselves, right? Because like by approaching everybody with this kind of universal sort of positive regard, right? You sort of, and by being transparent about it, that lets you tell the stories that other people don't want told, right? Because the truth comes out.
All right. So you're like, so since you're giving them an opportunity to tell their story, you feel like they're gonna tell the most truthful version of their story or whatever would make them, in their limelight.
Yeah.
And that's how like you abate like really bad situations happening to yourself.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
Precisely.
I mean, all right. I like that technique. I mean, I always wonder how it is that journalists are like, especially investigative journalists are like skating these like threat issues all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's also a lot of document work, right? Like when somebody comes at me with a news tip or a story, the first thing that I'm going to try and do is, listen to it completely, figure out where they're coming from, what their angles might be, obviously treat them as a human being, but then I'm also going to be like, all right,
What's the truth?
what documents do you have?
Oh, okay.
What do you have that can prove that this actually occurred? You got screenshots? All right, let me confirm the screenshots are really screenshots. You have public documents? How'd you get the public documents? Let me confirm the public documents are real. Do I need to get public documents to confirm your story? And do I need to file public documents requests? And do I need to get the company attorneys on the public document request? You see where it goes?
Yeah.
Right. So, like, it's just, you acknowledge everybody's humanity, you tell their story in the most fair way, but you also make sure the facts are completely 100% sealed and true, because your best defense always is the truth.
Wow. So the truth is really what's saving you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's intense, man. So what was it that made you want to go into this field? Like, you said you were like nerdy and like not a popular kid. Was that something that like, since you were like excluded from like the in group, is it something that made you look into the in group and say, I wonder how that works?
Yeah, that's a very good psychological read of my motivations for going into journalism, and something that I didn't realize about myself until like my late 20s.
Okay.
But yeah, Belen has a reputation for being kind of an interesting place.
Okay.
Right? And there was a lot of like hazing and a lot of bullying there.
Yeah, because it's all boys school.
It's an all boys school. Yeah, and it had a very machista culture.
Yeah. Like South Florida in general.
And I think my experience at Belen, like, it taught me very early on that I didn't like bullies, right? I didn't like other people who would use their power to push other people around. And that was always a part of my personality. But I didn't realize that it was going to become something like of a defining professional trait until like 2015, right?
Okay.
I don't know how much you know about the Dominican Republic and Haiti.
Yeah, no, I've been to Haiti.
Okay,
been to DR.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm Dominican. I grew up. I'm probably one of the whiter Dominicans you're gonna run into, right?
My ex-business partner was white Dominican.
There you go. Yeah. Right. So I'm part of the oligarchy down there, right? That I grew up there.
100%.
And Dominicans and Haitians
don't see eye to eye in a lot of things.
Yeah, right. And in 2015, 2014, what was happening is that the Dominican Republic took away the citizenship rights of about
I remember that.
270,000 Dominicans of Haitian descent. And what also happened at that point is that on the border, there were essentially pogroms, ethnic cleansings.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Right, yeah. And, like, how I got into journalism was really kind of weird, because I went down to the island for my grandpa's funeral, right? And at my grandpa's funeral, the subject kind of turned into like, oh, what's going on with the Haitians? And I was like, fam, like,
Yeah.
y'all are talking like Germans about Jews in 1937.
Yeah.
Like, this is not okay.
Uh-huh.
And that sort of led me to go to the border and talk to the Haitians who'd been displaced on the other side of the border in a place called Ansapitre
Okay.
in South Haiti. They'd been living in a section of the Dominican Republic called Pedernales.
Okay.
And these campesinos from Pedernales had come in with machetes and with torches, and it kicked them out. It kicked out around 4,000 people.
Wow.
And so I talked to them and, ended up writing stories about it. And those were my first journalism stories. And I sort of learned that, like, okay, wait a second. I'm willing to stay up all night doing this. Like, I won't sleep for days to get the story out. And that's probably what I should do professionally.
Wow, that's a good way to, like, you kind of, like, backed yourself into the journalism field. So it was, you started off as a poet, though.
Yeah.
And then it, like, somehow morphed into you being an investigative journalist because you found a bully that you wanted to tell a story about. Wow, that's so crazy, dude. That's a really back end way of going into it, but it
works. Never been a straight path for me, man.
That's good though.
Yeah.
I mean, you found what it is that you want to do with your time here on Earth. You know what I'm saying? And like tell these stories and work these angles. And it's something that is applaudable because I know a lot of people want to talk about these things, but they're oftentimes like very scared of like things like talking in general or like even shining a light to these type of situations, right? Because you never know like how that could backfire on your family, backfire on you, et cetera, et cetera. That's damn, that's cool. So you didn't actually study investigative journalism at school?
No, I didn't go to journalism school. I have a master's degree in Spanish literature. And I have another master's degree in poetry.
Okay, I mean the poetry cool and the Spanish literature.
Yeah, eso, that was like me in my early 20s being like, yo, it was the height of the recession, right?
Okay.
And I wanted to go back to school.
All right.
No, but I really wanted to connect with
your roots.
My roots, right? And so I ended up actually getting a master's degree in Hispanic Cultural Studies from Columbia University I think I graduated like 2011, 2012. I was a Spanish teacher for a long time.
Get out. Oh, yeah, you said it in the book. You went to... No, but you were teaching English when you were in China, right?
I taught English in China, in Guangzhou, yeah. Okay. But I taught Spanish and history at like high-end private schools in the Northeast for a while.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, bro. So then the investigative journalism led you to obviously do these articles for various papers. Yeah. And then it drew you now into the author world, right?
Yeah.
With Disposable City, because the book is like an investigative...
Well, it's really funny. Like, I'm actually an investigative journalist because I wrote this book. Right? What? Yeah, because I told you I do everything backwards. Okay, right? Yeah. So I was in my MFA program at the University of Miami, and I was freelancing as a journalist, writing for the Miami New Times, for the New Tropic, and I was writing about Miami and climate change, and I ended up selling this book, right?
Without it being written?
Without it being written.
Okay, so you sold the idea of the book.
I sold the idea of the book. I wrote like a couple chapters, called up an agent that I knew or the agent helped me write the chapters, and he helped me sell it. But like, it was a process. I like graduated from my MFA program, and then maybe like 5 or 6 months later, I sold the book. Okay. And then I had to like sit down and write it.
So since you already sold it, it pushed you into saying, "Damn, I have to finish this out. I gotta write the book."
Right. And then I sat down and I wrote it, and it turned into, it was like writing like a PhD thesis almost. Yeah. Right. It's more exciting than that, I hope.
No, it definitely is. It's 100% better than a thesis.
But like, but what it took to write the book, right? Yeah. The interviews, the fact finding, the getting the public records, the sitting in federal court, right? Yeah. That was enough to signal to people in newspapers, right? That like, oh, yo, this guy can do it. Yeah. And so that's how I ended up with my first newsroom job.
Nice. So that was like your resume.
That's like that's like my job application.
100%.
Yeah, for being a journalist.
Yeah. That's dope, dude. I mean, yo, for anybody who wants to be a journalist, you already know the roadmap.
There you
dog.
go. Right.
Write your book. That's investigative. You're gonna get that job, G. Like, so let's get into the book. I mean, the book. You say you researched and you interviewed over
150 people, 150 at least.
150 people.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long did it take you all along? Like, and what was the process like? Let's go through that.
Yeah, so it's a little difficult for me to like say like, oh, I started writing the book at this point, right?
Oh,
because like the way it got sold, I started writing the essay that became the center of this book 4 years before the book was published.
Before it was sold or before it was published?
Before it was published. Before it was published. I had to write 3 chapters before the book got sold. Right?
Okay.
One of which didn't end up in the book.
Okay.
And so I guess the best way to say it was a 4-year process.
Okay.
That really started with me writing an essay about this concept known as resilience.
Okay, yeah.
And actually like sitting down and talking about my experiences at Belen.
Okay.
And bullying and dealing with like being told to toughen up and stuff. And that essay ended up in like Best American Essays 2019. Helped me sell the book. But it was a long process, and like it's hard to describe, right? Because like if I was going to tell you, oh yeah, from the moment I sold the book, which was like September of 2018, to the time when I got my first newsroom job and like had to like turn in a completed manuscript, it was about a year.
Okay.
Right. And during that year, I did nothing but write. Right, like.
But you were writing and you were like interviewing these people and doing so you were like pulling the records and doing all of that from the. At what point did you start doing all those record stuff? It's like you started the essay like long time ago, right? Prior to you actually putting the book together. But that's just an essay. That's not like you actually going in and putting in the work for the book to be made. You know, like when was it that you started saying, I'm putting in work to do this book?
Probably September of 2018. Okay. And then like I was still kind of working a full-time job. I like quit it in January. Well, yeah. We parted ways amicably in January. Yeah. And then things got real. Like it was like, all right, I have to produce a book chapter a month. And so it was like, you give yourself 2 weeks to report it. Yeah. Right? Talk to everybody you need to talk to, gather all the documentation you need to gather. Yeah. And then 1 week to write it, another week to edit. And so you can pop out 10,000 words in a month. Wow. Yeah. That's intense, dude. It was super intense, man. It was like really intense. And then for records, like because I didn't have an attorney with me. Yeah. Right. And like now, if like, for example, like there's an organization in here, like the Port of Miami. Okay. Right. Like the Port of Miami did not want to give me the records that I was asking for. At all. Right. They were like being a little shifty about it. Okay. Right. And I ended up getting the records from somebody else whose name I can't mention. Yeah. Who was like, yo, psst, here are the records that you're looking for. Yeah. Right? But if I would have had an attorney, they would have done it. They would have been like, yo, this is a 119 records request under Florida Sunshine Statute. This is our intent to sue if you don't give us the records. And I would have gotten the records out of them much faster. It took me a year to get some of those records about how vulnerable the port is. Side note, the port is really vulnerable. We're going to get into it in a minute, bro. But so all of those things led you to then get the paperwork, to then start writing, and then start producing all the various chapters. So when you go about writing this book, right, your first thing you said was you were thinking about resilience. Resilience is the word that like all the politicians keep throwing out there. Yes. Like as if it's a magic bullet or something. Right, right. And it's so resilience, I guess the most, you're going to hear it everywhere when the climate conversation comes up, right? Which is when? That's my number one question. Right, like when is this going to get real, this conversation? Yes. It's starting to get a little real in terms of adaptation and resilience, right? Because now you've got Republicans in the Florida legislature and the governor. Now we're starting to put money into, okay, let's not flood so much.
Okay.
Right? But we're not putting money into like, hey, let's not pollute so much. So it's like, it's
Yeah.
like a smoker getting
Like, hey, let's
treated
try
for
to actually
cancer.
fix the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a smoker getting treated for cancer without quitting smoking right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I see happen.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
You're like, yo, you smoking that Marlboro Red and you just had chemo, and it's
Yeah,
like
what?
all right, Florida.
Such is life.
Such is life. But yeah, so resilience is this idea where like you can bounce back after getting punched, right? And you can deal with the shocks and stresses. And now cities have offices of resilience. Counties have offices of resilience. We have chief resilience officers, right? But it's this really weird thing where like, you're going to get taxed here in city of Miami. Mm-hmm. You're going to get taxed as a Florida citizen. You're going to get taxed as a Miami-Dade County resident to deal with flooding, to deal with the effects of climate change, right?
Yeah.
But there's very little action going on. Well, now with the Biden administration, there's some other action going on. But there's, in general, very little action going on to reduce the actual causes of climate change at the state and federal levels. Yeah. So it's kind of like you being told, like, all right, buddy, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, be resilient. You're going to deal with this flooding. You're going to deal with these hurricanes. You can do it. Yeah. Here's a little bit of money. But at the end of the day, right, like the water's going to keep rising.
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
In reality,
there's
you can't do it.
There's not enough money. There's just not enough money down here to like adapt this city to the point where it needs to get adapted.
Mario died. All right, bro. Okay. So this is the nitty gritty. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. So I have massive amounts of anxiety when it comes to
you and me both.
To like climate change in South Florida, the sea level rise. After listening to your book, bro, like honestly, I came away with like I was just like, bro, what are we gonna do? Like, what's happening? I feel like it's all right. So I talked to this. My friends have already told me to shut the fuck up, and literally they've told me clearly, like, don't talk about this. We have like dinner parties or whatever. We might link up, have a beer, and I always bring this up.
Right.
I'm a millennial, right?
Right.
We're in the stage where we want to start buying houses, right? We want to get into our home. We want to have kids. I still don't have a kid. I want to have a kid. But, I mean, there's certain things that I want to secure, obviously, like primarily my living situation.
Right? Yeah.
For my kid, right? And, like, for myself and to, like, and really establish roots. And it's just, like, there's really a lot of warning signs that says, like, yo, don't do that here in Miami.
Right?
And it's hard for me because I was born and raised here, man.
I know.
So it's like, how do I? And then I tell everybody else, like, yo, we gotta start. My friends who are like buying homes. I had a friend of mine literally just put in a brand new septic tank. I told him about all the things that you were talking about in your septic tank. Yeah. He lives in the Shores.
Oh my God, he lives in Miami Shores.
He lives in Miami Shores, and he put it in a brand new septic tank right now.
He should have connected to city sewer.
He should. I told him, but to connect to the sewer
was like $40,000, $50,000.
Was like 50 racks.
There you go.
To do the septic was like 8 racks or 9 racks. You know, so. I mean, but I was telling him, bro, don't do that. Do this connect. But everybody tells me, all my friends are telling me that I'm like killing basically the buzz, you know, like.
Yeah, man.
And nobody wants to talk about it. Right. Nobody wants to address it. Right. Nobody wants to say that this is gonna happen. And I'm a big cyclist too.
Right.
So I cycle around South Florida.
Yeah.
And I actively could tell what places are going to be like 100% underwater in the upcoming future. And then your book also mentioned the flood insurance situation.
Oh, yeah.
That's coming soon, right? Yeah. They're supposed to drop it by October this year.
That's going to cost some people some money.
That's without, like, that's if they don't push it, right? Because I've been reading that they might push it. They pushed it back a
little bit. Yeah.
Because they don't want to deal with it.
Kind of like, right? Because it's una bomba.
Yeah, it's literally una bomba right there. Like, it's a bomba that will affect South Florida tremendously.
Oh my God, yeah, because it's going to eat into your house budget. It's going to reduce the amount of money for your home. It's super complicated, but at the same time, it's like, homeowners insurance is already going up. Windstorm is going up. And then for flood insurance, which has always been super cheap, right? Cheap AF, yeah. Right? It's like, it's just ridiculously cheap. And you're like, well, why is this so cheap? Well, because it's a government program from the 1950s, literally designed to like give you cheap insurance.
Yeah.
And the government can't afford that anymore.
Obviously.
And so it's gonna rise, and it's gonna start reflecting the actual risk of living in a place where, you know, the right kind of hurricane can put an 18-foot wall of water across the beach.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's gonna, I mean, I've been having this like vivid daydream of like, and I hope it doesn't happen, you know, God protégenos, babe.
Right.
Like of of Miami getting hit with like a
The big one?
the big
Yeah,
hurricane,
man.
and it completely devastated, because I was here for Andrew.
Right,
I mean,
you remember that.
I remember that.
Right.
I remember going down to Homestead, going down to 152, you know, and seeing like devastation like on a level and a scale that's I've never seen ever again after that, you know, personally.
Yeah.
It was really crazy, like whole entire, not even neighborhoods, like whole entire sections of the city were just like wiped away,
flattened.
like gone.
Absolutely.
And
you know?
and I remember the National Guard coming in with the water, everybody trying to get waters, fighting over water, and like MREs. I remember eating MREs for, so like if that happens today in like a center of the city, because I was at Homestead, if that happens like in downtown,
Imagine if that hits the
Brickell,
port and the airport.
or Wynwood, that whole section where
Right?
Wynwood, the airport, the port, and Wynwood are all relatively close. And this is where a lot, like especially Wynwood, there's a lot of development going on, right? Yeah. So like that could completely devastate. That could be the wake up call, but it could also completely like just level the city to a point where people are just gonna be like, nah, I'm out of here. Like,
yeah, I mean, so there's a lot there, right?
Yeah.
One is like, as a millennial, how do I protect myself and live in Miami?
Yeah.
Right. And
First question.
And first question, right? Because I'm 33.
Okay.
Right? And I love this place. I want to stay here. I want to fight for it, but I don't want to get bit in the butt by what's going to happen here. And so there's some things that you can do to reduce your risk, right? And it's, you know, if you're going to buy a house, buy it on high ground. If you're, you know, going to buy a house, don't buy something that is on septic, buy it on sewer. You know, like make sure that you know what kind of flood insurance zone it's going to be in, et cetera, if you're going to buy a house. But also you have to like, you know, kind of reconcile the fact that you may not make a return on that investment, right? Like it's going to be something that like the home prices here may crater, right? And so like if you're going to live here, you have to think very, very clearly about like, okay, my home cannot be my main way of building equity.
but that's everybody's thing.
Right? But that's the model for the United States. Exactly. So you're like, well, what do I do? And I'm in that trap too. Because like, what do I do? Do I buy a house in Orlando and try and rent it out? And like, first of all,
Yeah, I thought about that too.
I thought about that. It's like, well, okay, like, do I try and get my friends together and do we like pool our property and like buy some stuff in West Virginia? I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You
like,
know,
what are the solutions?
what are the solutions for that? And like, I think I don't have solutions for like, I don't see companies stepping up. I don't see entrepreneurs really I know a couple people stepping into this space trying to be like, okay, let's talk about home sales in Miami and like, let's be honest about risk, right? But like, there's a space here for an entrepreneur at the millennial level to just be like, hey, look, this city has an end date on it, right? Yeah. Like, we're going to lose 6 or 7 neighborhoods by 2060, 2070, right? God, so, like, one, don't buy in those neighborhoods. 2, like, what is that going to do to the tax base here? And then if you are somebody who wants to build wealth, right? If you're somebody who is like, okay, I want to, you know, have a nice retirement, what are the strategies that we can do? Yeah. Right? Aside from like moving to Atlanta, which is aside from
leaving the city.
Aside from leaving the city. And I think that's a conversation that people our age in Miami need to be having.
But they're afraid of having it.
I absolutely, because it's a scary one.
It's a very, very scary.
It's a very scary, because you have to confront the reality that your city is being treated disposably. Yeah. Right? Plug. Yeah. You know, but you also have to confront the reality that, like, listen, like, the world is going to change a lot because of climate change in your lifetime. By the time you're set to retire, things are going to be really different.
I mean, do you really, I mean, I don't think so, but, and I know because I literally, like, I'm very vocal, you know, especially with my friends. They're always like, you talk too much, you know? Yeah. But it's like, I tell them exactly all these things and it's not only you, like, I go in and, like, there's this one website, it's called ss2climatechange.com. and it basically is like the NOAA lets
Yeah.
you play with the like how much water is gonna go, how the city will look,
Right.
depending on
Right, with
how
like
much
2 feet, 3
2
feet of
yeah, it goes
water.
all the way
Yeah,
to 10
yeah.
feet.
Right.
And I've been playing with that map for years.
Years.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I came when I came across it, I always look at it like, oh, this is the good places to purchase. You can see the ridge where
Right.
everybody talk about in Little
Right.
Haiti, et cetera, et cetera. And I just went onto that map the other day, and they changed the map.
Right, yeah.
So they upgraded it, and they actually put it like the city's gonna flood in like 3 feet of water type of situation,
And I mean,
right? So like I look at that, and I talk to my friends about it. I'm like, yo, shut up, don't talk about it because I just want to party and drink and chill. And then I'm just like, okay, but like let's party and drink and chill, but let's see how we're also gonna try to like mitigate this. Nobody wants to try to mitigate it. I kind of feel like it's a done data. I feel like it's baked in the cake. South Florida, I mean, 100% disposable city.
Right.
And it's literally already like everybody's ready to just like jump ship at the moment that the real shit hits the fan.
right, right. I mean, it's possible. Like, first of all, there's really good people down here, our age, of all ages, fighting to make this a better place. Right? Like,
Okay.
there's a good group of folks. Like, I run a group chat.
Yeah.
We got about 250 people,
Okay.
everything from climate activists to city officials to reporters
Okay.
to everybody sort of involved in talking about this, right? And there's been good stuff that's happened, right? For instance, Biscayne Bay is dying.
Yeah.
We got a chief bay officer appointed recently, and it seems like there's going to be some systemic ways to address the issue of like the water quality and stuff like that. But at some point, the party's going to stop.
Yeah.
Right, and it's likely going to stop with a big hurricane flooding a large chunk of the city for a significant portion of time.
Yeah.
Right, like if I had to put my money on it.
I mean,
Right.
yeah, I've dreamt it.
And that's going to be a big push, right? What you're going to see.
You think that's the lightning round?
That might, I mean, like if you just look at the statistics, right? Like Miami-Dade County has the largest population of economically vulnerable people subject to climate-based displacement in the United States, right? So like it's gonna be like you ever seen like one of those like kind of like, you know, when you start a game of pool and you hit the ball exactly
Yeah,
where you need it
right.
and it just goes,
Yeah.
right? Like it could be like that very easily, and you just see a huge migration to Orlando, Atlanta,
Okay, yeah,
further beyond.
That's the gist of the question. Like, do you feel like it's just gonna be like you feel like it's gonna be a one thing that's gonna like set it off, or it's gonna be like a slow trickle?
I feel like prices are going to have an effect of creating a slow trickle unless you can enact policies that reduce that. I mean, already, like, we're not growing that much down here.
Yeah.
The population is set to start shrinking. The prices are going to start going up, especially if this gets real San Francisco and New York like.
Yeah.
But really, like, if you look at what happened with Katrina, if you look at what happened with Maria,
Yeah.
right, it's a big push that happens, right? And somebody goes, go. And then
You know what?
who gets pushed? It's working class folks.
So the things that are driving this type of situation in my head, I mean, you know, and you touch on it in the book, is like primarily developers, right? They don't have any incentive to change their ways
None.
in any way, shape, or
None.
form. You're talking about like the Biscayne Bay resilience, and like you see how the Biscayne Bay is dying, but the developers who are developing right up against the Biscayne Bay are throwing discharge from
The
all these
construction
construction
sites.
sites.
Oh, yeah.
And they're what is it? They're I think it's like $500 or $1,000 is their fine
Yeah,
for
the
something
fine
like
is
that.
nothing.
Something
Yeah.
insignificant
Right.
as fuck to a developer who's creating a building worth $1 billion or some shit like that. So I mean, that's why I say it's like baked in the cake because
Oh, yeah.
you really can't go against big money like that.
Yeah.
The only way big money loses is if other bigger money comes in and pushes it.
Yeah, perhaps. I also tend to think that, like, so Florida itself has a history of just being one long con, right? Like one big lie, right?
Okay.
Like when the state first started examining whether or not the area that we've grown up in and lived in
Yeah.
could even like sustain large amounts of humans here who weren't living in a Native American lifestyle, and the state didn't consider those Native Americans humans. it starts with this guy named Hamilton Diston, and Diston essentially like conned the state into trying to pay for the drainage, right? And then there were people down here who were like selling Northeasterners flooded property, right? And so it's always been sort of based on a fiction, right? And the fiction is that this land that you live on is going to be here forever. It's not, right? But when somebody's selling you a South Florida condo, what are you thinking? You're buying into that fiction, and perhaps you're doing it with eyes open, right? Perhaps you're thinking maybe I can get out before the game of musical chairs stops. Maybe if you have an exit plan for that asset, but like let's not kid ourselves, right? There's a very narrow path to saving this city that involves everybody getting their stuff together in terms of emissions. Is that really going to happen? I don't know. Are Biden's climate plans at the moment enough to save Miami? I haven't done the analysis, right? But
Highly doubtful.
Were saying highly doubtful, right?
Highly doubtful.
But like we were saying, like this city is a hustle.
Yeah.
Right. And so like okay, one way to stop big money doing stupid things is bigger money being like, yo, stop doing stupid things.
Yeah.
But another way is for just the money to be destroyed. Right? Like folly, and
like
hubris.
them coming down on themselves.
Exactly, right? Like for this to collapse, right? And so that would be awful. This is my city. I love it. That would be an unneeded degree of human suffering. But like, also like, Greek tragedy is called Greek tragedy for a reason.
100%.
Like, and hubris is real.
I mean, developers really do have a short-term interest. And I guess I never had thought about them like flying too close to the sun type of situation.
Exactly.
I always think like maybe the Green New Deal and all that new money that's pushing in would like push them into a direction where they have to do things. But no, I could totally see that. So, I mean, if developers could get brought into line, right? Then we still have the issue of the fact that we sit on top of limestone. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's something you touch on too. So it's like we deal with the developers who are actively destroying the environment.
Right.
But then we run out of fresh water, and first and foremost. And then we have salt water going into the aquifer. And on top of that, in October of last year, they started trading futures of fresh water on the NASDAQ, which a lot of people are not aware of, is NQH2O, just in case anybody's looking into these futures. And they have various basins. It's for the West Coast.
Right.
Up into Texas.
Right.
So they have various basins that they're selling a foot of, what is it, an acre foot? That's what they call it. An acre foot of future water rights. That hasn't happened here in South Florida as of yet.
Right, because of the way our regulatory state is structured. You can't sell water.
So far.
Right.
I mean,
True.
This is Florida. So, I mean, right now they're trying to pass a law to I don't know, censure or ban Google from, or Twitter from.
Oh, yeah. You never know what the Florida legislature is
you never, like, that's the dumbest shit ever, bro. Like, that's a private company. They can do whatever the hell they want to do.
Yeah,
but no, you're passing a law
that's problematic.
Whatever. But, like, so the Florida legislature could totally in one day just be like, we're going to sell the waters out here. And there's really not that much water if all the salt water keeps creeping into the limestone. So that would be really profitable for somebody who's thinking ahead out here, right?
Yeah. Right.
But at the same time, it would be very much a disaster for the rest of South Florida who has to access fresh water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like all these different storms are coming together to create that one perfect storm that really says like South Florida is screwed type of situation, right? Yeah. So how do we as I do it, this entire season is dedicated to basically asking everybody, what are you doing to bring awareness to climate change? Because I, by myself, when I talk to people about it, they like, if I talk to my friends, they'll tell me to shut up because I talk too much about it. So I want other people to be aware and then them carry the message. But if nobody really is interested in looking at the sad side of it, because that's what it's going to be. It's just going to be a long period of sadness until some kind of like gleaming hope, if there is any gleaming hope, will come about. How do we get people to like say, look, man, there's all these converging bad storms coming to South Florida at the same time. Like, wake up, people, wake up.
Yeah. So one of the awful things about climate change in South Florida, and one of the really interesting things about climate change in South Florida, is that it turns very quickly into a quality of life issue, right?
What do you mean by that?
So for example, we're putting a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. The atmosphere is heating up. The water molecules between, or the air molecules are more spaced out. Thus, the atmosphere can hold more water, and it rains harder. It literally rains harder right now because the atmosphere is hotter. Right? So that means you get 7 inches of rain, and that means that your drive on the Palmetto from Doral to, Kendall,
Yeah.
in the fall, when those rains show up, all of a sudden that 40-minute drive can turn into a 2.5-hour drive porque entró tremenda lluvia y lo cagó todo.
Yeah.
Right?
Tremendo aguacero.
Tremendo aguacero. And that's going to start happening more frequently, right? Because it's going to start raining less often, but when it rains, it's going to rain harder and more, right? And so all of a sudden, that's a quality of life issue for you because the drainage on your route from home to work starts to matter, right? Because whether or not those streets are drained can determine whether or not you get home in time for your show, right? Or in time for Netflix and chill with your friends or your
whatever
people.
you might be
exactly,
doing.
right? And you're like, well, wait a second, bro. What can I do about the atmosphere? Nothing. You can get an electric car, but you can get involved in the municipal process, right? Okay, you live in Miami-Dade County. Who's your commissioner? Who is your district commissioner in Doral? Who's your district commissioner in Kendall, where you live, right? Like, what are they doing to ensure that the drainage on your drive is going to be working? Are there drainage improvements going on? Call them. Ask. Make them answer. If they don't get back to you, well, why are you voting for these guys, right? Get involved in the process. And like I said, it's going to be a quality of life issue really, really quickly. Your buddy who just put in that new septic tank, he should really get involved in the political process because there's money in there for him.
Not only that, but Miami Shores taxes are ridiculous.
They're ridiculous, right?
Ridiculous.
But maybe if he asks the right politicians the right questions, he can get in touch with somebody who's doing a rebate program that'll help him hook up to sewer, right? Or maybe they... he can join a group of people that are advocating for the creation of a rebate program to like give him the money to hook up to sewer, right? So there's solutions here, and the solutions are associated with participating in this democracy,
which is very unheard of in South Florida.
right?
That's another problem. You see what I'm saying?
That's another problem. Yes,
dude. It's just like, bro, Mario. It's just like problems on top of problems on top of problems.
Yes.
It's like
yes.
Nobody here is engaged civically.
I know. That's what worries me. That's really what because like we have some of the lowest levels of voter and civic engagement in the country, right? And we're the place that needs it the most. Like you got to be reading your newspaper, plug. You got to be, calling your representatives. You got to be calling your commissioners. You got to be calling your district council people, right? Because this system is what keeps you alive, right? And the political system and the infrastructure that brings you the stuff that you need, the electricity, the water, whatever, it's all very threatened.
So if the people, so the people with resources, you're saying it's a quality of life issue. It'll become a quality of life issue very front and center. So, that could be the catalyst to start people like saying, what are we going to do? But the people with resources are most likely just going to ride out. You know what I'm saying? Because they have the resources.
Mobile. Yeah.
They have the ability to like get up and leave. Like, okay, their primary source of like retirement probably isn't their house.
Right.
They have like 401ks and they have like other assets invested in various. You have commodities, whatever it might be. Like you have that because you have that level of resource and wealth. So for you, I'll sell my house for a discount. Maybe 10%. I didn't make money on it. And I lived in it though. So I lived in it for X amount of years. I lost 5% on it, but I came away with a big portion of my actual initial investment.
Right.
And now I could go somewhere else.
Right.
People in underprivileged parts of the city, especially people of color, POCs, don't have that opportunity.
Yep.
And they also don't engage civically.
Right.
So
'Cause
it's
they're
a
too busy
double-edged
working.
sword.
Mm-hmm.
And those people who don't have any actual resources are gonna deal with the front of it.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to stay here,
Yeah.
or either gonna flee to Kissimmee or something like
Right.
that. And what's gonna be left of the city will probably be like a uber rich enclaves, if there is.
Well, you touched on something really important there, which is that climate change tends to most negatively affect those who have the least power to change what is happening, right?
Exactly.
So who is going to bear the brunt of Miami's changing climate, right? It's the working classes of Miami. It's the folks in Gould, right?
Yeah.
Who will get flooded out but don't have the cash to get out.
Yeah.
Right? And so you look at that and you think to yourself, oh my God, what's going on here, right?
Yeah.
Like this is just going to make the rich richer and the poor poorer.
100%.
Right? And you think to yourself, all right, well, what can be done here? And this is where, as a journalist, I have to be very careful to talk about particular solutions. But like when you're talking about solutions to the climate crisis, it is difficult to not realize that you could have an energy transition, right? A switch from fossil fuels generation to renewable power generation that really empowers communities that have been left behind, right? So what does that mean? That means, all right, FPL, NextEra, Duke Energy, sorry, bros. I know you put all that money into getting oil and gas in here, and that you power us off of gas.
Yeah.
But we're going solar. Peace. Okay, who wants to build some solar panels? Right? And then everybody who needs, who's working 2 or 3 jobs right now, they're all service jobs, they're shitty jobs, no healthcare, part-time, etc. You're like, yo, you want to build some solar panels? Union job, 60 hours, 23, 24, 25 an hour, healthcare, benefits, let's build some solar panels. Right? And so I mean that's a very rough sketch of what that looks like, though.
No, but I totally understand.
But so you use the need for the transition, right? The need to completely reorient how your society powers itself
has to be done
as an opportunity to create equity, right? To address, right? Because look at like Richmond Heights and Goulds and Palmetto Bay. I grew up in Palmetto Bay, right? Or what is now, it was not Palmetto Bay back then.
Yeah. It was just Palmetto.
Yeah, it was just Palmetto. But why do those 2 parts of town look very different, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's because when they
US
got
one?
built, well, US one was a barrier, right?
Yeah,
and so because one part of town was primarily black and one part of town was primarily white, and the Federal Housing Administration in the 1930s, 1940s wanted to keep it that way, they literally drew a red line around the black neighborhoods on the other side of the street from where I grew up, and they said, we're not going to lend you all money.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
redlining is crazy.
Redlining.
Yeah.
And so that kicked off or shut out 2 generations worth of people of color from building wealth.
Yeah, upward mobility.
That wasn't possible there, right? Because you weren't going to develop equity on your home, right? And so perhaps maybe this change that we have now an opportunity to make can address that, because those are the people who are going to be the most affected by it. Because if you live in Palmetto Bay, chances are you can GTFO.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? But if you live across the street in Richmond Heights or Gould,
not so much.
Not so much.
Wow, bro, that's so optimistic, man. I hadn't thought about the transition could be the catalyst for upward mobility for POCs if it's done properly. Wow, dude, that's a big light bulb right there you just put in my head.
Yeah. But it can happen, and what it takes is people getting organized, people getting involved, participating in the civic process, and not letting their leaders or their politicians off the hook.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot of work.
That's a lot to ask for people in Miami who are just literally trying to survive on a day-to-day basis, which at least 50% of the population here,
that's
I
what
will
they're
say,
living like.
that's what they live like.
I know.
So it's like you get them to say, come home from putting up stucco all day And then
Right.
now start getting civic. Don't watch your telenovela.
Don't watch your show. Go to a city council.
Go to a city council meeting.
Right? For a discussion about zoning.
Yes.
I know, I'm asking a lot.
I'm
asking a lot. So the question becomes, like, how can we make that fun?
Yes. How do we make that fun? How do we make that an engaging process where people want to go out and talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
That's all right. I mean, that's the next level. But I see how you like lay a path where it could definitely happen. Like, it could. I mean, prior to this talk, I just thought it was just like gloom and doom.
No,
100%,
there's a path. Dude. There's a path. That's the crazy thing. It's like you can walk around in this city like feeling just absolute doom.
Yeah.
Everywhere you step, right? You like look at all the pretty things and think how this isn't gonna be there, right? Like I can go surfing on South Beach, and I surf on South Beach a lot, and it's gorgeous and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I can have a great session and think to myself, man, this isn't gonna be here in 20, 25 years. This break isn't gonna work anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And I can feel bad about that. Or I can use the threat of it to catalyze me and to motivate me as a way of being like, well, if I don't get my act together and if I don't fight as hard as I can, this won't be here. But if I do everything I can, right, and it still, goes away, at least I will have said, well, this city failed, but I fought the good fight.
100%, dude. 100%. Bro, I agree with you. I'm there with you, man. There's this one line out of your book that said that was the line is, all of my memories will soon be underwater.
Yeah.
That line, when I heard that line, dude, first of all, I rewinded it like 5-6 times because as they got read out, I was like, it really hit me. And I was driving down 8th Street over here, bro, like heading to Sonia Seafood, holla, and I'm just like listening to this, thinking about like, trying to get some seafood in me. And I hear like that line is just like literally everything that I grew up with. Especially I grew up down south, man. And that's dude. Like really gonna be severely affected.
It's a heavy thought.
It's very heavy, man. It's really, and thought. I understand why people don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand why my friends tell me shut up all the time. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like, yo, you might not want to hear it, but you got to hear this. Mm-hmm. Because then the next minute you're going to be like, oh, nobody told me this shit was happening.
Ajá, no.
Eso va a pasar. Garantizado.
Y fui yo que te lo conté.
For sure. It's going to be like, yo, nobody said that we were going to be on the water. Like, why did I buy a house? Bro, why
did I buy that house in Homestead built by, I'm not going to name them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I always wondered out by Doral. Doral's literally next to the swamp, and it got dredged but the housing in Doral is extremely expensive. So it's just like, okay, I understand why Venezuelans and exiles of Venezuela want to live in Doral because it's their community and they feel like, but at the same time, I don't think they're really understanding how like that could be flooded in like 5-10 years from now because they're literally next to the Everglades. Like what's separating them is the turnpike.
One of the biggest concerns that and this is like a sleeper threat, right? This is like the White Walkers, right? Okay. Like nobody knows about them right now, right? Like this entire city, this entire region is made possible by a drainage system.
Yeah.
Right? And it's called the CSNF. I forget what it stands for. Central and South Florida Everglades Flood System or something. I'm getting that wrong. It was built in the 40s. It's managed by the South Florida Water Management District. It is losing its capacity to drain the city swiftly because as the tides rise, its ability to get the water out is degraded. And that means that your drainage isn't going to work as well, and then one day it might not. And if that system isn't improved upon, right, if there isn't an infrastructure action by the federal government that literally hands Florida billions of dollars, and if there aren't Floridians in Tallahassee who say, hey, we need to get this fixed, and if your politicians down here aren't like, yo, we really need to get this fixed, right, if that doesn't get fixed, your timeline of how long you can hang out in Doral and keep eating those, like, great, like, pupusas or whatever, the tequeños, like, bro, that timeline gets real short.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to get from your car to the Colombian restaurant without wearing a pair of wading boots because it's just going to be flooded.
Hi, bro. I mean, bro, I could tell you love the city.
Yeah, man.
I love the shit out of this city. It's just we really need to get our act together. There's a lot of things that we haven't touched on that you touched on in your book.
Yeah, it's pretty
Disposable City. I highly, highly, highly recommend anybody from out of South Florida, anybody who loves South Florida, anything along those lines, just pick up a copy of this book. Listen to it on Audible. Pick it up, the physical copy. Where are they on sale?
Books and Books, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold, you should be
Amazon, everything.
Amazon, everywhere.
Bro, 100%. This book literally put me onto a lot of things. I mean, but you know what? I am glad we had this conversation because you really, you gave me optimism, dude. Before this, I was just like... It's not all,
there's a little bit of hope.
There's like a sliver. You know, the silver lining is literally not even a lining, bro. You know?
But now that you know that's there, you gotta fight for it.
Yes, 100%. I mean, now I know what I should tell my friends. Instead of just telling them, yo, we're gonna be flooded and it's just gonna be horrible. Now I know, like, okay, we gotta be civically engaged. We got to do these things. I'm going to try to push as much awareness in that direction. I highly recommend anybody who's listening to this do the same thing with your friends, family members, etc., your circle of influence, because it's like we love this city. We all have to come together and fight for it. We really got to fight for it, because if not, this motherfucker is going to be gone. It's going to be disappeared.
Pretty much.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's just, man, it's just so many things. It's so many things. I love this city so much, and the people in it, you know. Yeah. But yeah, this it really is being treated as a disposable city, and we gotta, bring those people to account. I mean, you were talking about the federal government sending money. The very first thing that came to my head was corruption. I was like, okay, the federal government might give Florida a shitload of money, but then they might just pocket it doing stupid things, because that's literally... You need
journalists out there watching, making sure the money gets spent the right way.
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah. And right now there's an attack on journalism. So it's just like, that's even worse. Yeah. And we're in Florida, and the orange monster lives like less than an hour from me. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's a lot of those things, bro. Yeah. But Mario, thank you so much.
Darwin, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for reading. Thank you so much for shouting out, for having this great conversation. If
people wanted to get in contact with you, if they want to reach out to you, they want to send you some... What if somebody has a little secret or something they want to say? How do they get in contact with you?
You can reach out to me over Twitter.
Okay.
So it's at in a minor key. Right? All together. In minor, M-I-N-O-R, key, K-E-Y.
All right.
That's my Twitter handle. You can also just search Mario Ariza. You'll find me on Twitter. And my Proton Mail account, right, which is an encrypted mail, is right on the Twitter handle. If you want to send me any kind of anonymous messages, I'm also on Signal. I'm on WhatsApp. But if you want to reach out anonymously or in a secure fashion, all that information is there.
Yes, please do, man. Please do. If you have something that you want to bring to light, especially if it has to deal with climate change for South Florida, I highly recommend you guys please do that. And let's get this together, man. I know we can get this together, because I've seen us do it for other things. It's just, it has to be that somebody, they have to, bro, saving the city isn't enough for you. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, bro. Man. 100%. Like, this city's great. I want to keep living here.
100%. Right? I want my kids to live here.
Exactly.
Exactly. Damn. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you once again.
Yeah.
Once again, bro. And this is Darwin Figueroa, the Que Bola podcast. You know what it is. If you love it, once again, share it with your friends. If you hate it, share it with your enemies. But just share this motherfucker. Hasta la próxima. Peace. Y'all heard it right there, bro. I really want to thank Mario for coming in and spending some time and taking time away from his invested journalism that he does at the Sun Sentinel and discussing these really pertinent topics to people who are living in South Florida. You really, really must go out there and get this book. Get it in an Audible format. That's the easiest way, and man, it's just gonna help you out tremendously in this swampy life out here in South Florida. Alright? Hasta la próxima. You know what it is. It's your boy D Fig. Please share it with your friends. Subscribe, rate it, share it. I really want to thank you for taking time and listening to this podcast. Hasta la próxima. We'll be in contact. Anybody want to holler at your boy? WhatsApp at phresherphresh.com. WhatsApp, WASSA at phresherphresh.com. Thank you so much. Peace.